My name is Elara Reed, and for 15 years I lived hollowed out by the death of my son, Finn, who was killed in a motorcycle crash at age 19. The drunk driving incident severed the invisible thread that connected us, leaving me trapped in a state of suspended grief. My husband, Graham, couldn't cope with the shared trauma and left, but I remained anchored to Finn's memory, keeping his room untouched and his old cell phone number active just to hear his recorded voice. Every Sunday, I visited his grave at Greenwood Memorial Park in Seattle, cleaning the headstone beneath the big oak tree and talking to him as if he could hear me. I had simply learned to coexist with the pain. This life of carefully managed sorrow shattered at 3:27 a.m. on a Wednesday. My phone rang, displaying the name Finn. When I answered, I heard his distinct, terrified voice asking, "Mom, where am I? It's completely dark in here." He described being trapped, feeling wood, dirt, and being encased in the unfamiliar suit we had bought for his burial. I struggled to reconcile the voice of my son with the impossible truth. I had buried him 15 years ago. My mind searched for a rational explanation, a cruel joke, a technical glitch, but the intimacy of his voice, the memory of his old phone buried with him, overpowered all logic. He was scared and running out of battery. Ignoring the absurdity, I promised to find him. I threw on a jacket, grabbed the keys to my vintage Ford Bronco, and raced through the pre-dawn streets of Seattle to the cemetery. I woke up the kind night watchman, Mr. Bellamy, who, seeing my desperation, reluctantly let me in. I fell to my knees at Finn's grave, futilely scratching at the undisturbed soil. Realizing I couldn't dig him up alone, I called Graham, demanding his help to secure an immediate, court-ordered exhumation. Though skeptical, the panic in my voice and the sheer impossibility of my claim convinced him to agree to meet me immediately. Part 2 Graham arrived quickly, skeptical but clearly shaken. He looked terrible, but the shock of my story was visible in his eyes. He listened again as I recounted the details of the phone call and the desperate drive to the cemetery. He struggled to find a rational explanation, suggesting a cruel prank, but just as he was questioning my sanity, my phone vibrated. On the screen, the name Finn flashed again. Graham watched, his face draining of color, as I answered and put the call on speaker. Finn spoke again, calmer this time, revealing he had found a small flashlight and confirmed he was trapped in the casket, wearing the suit and surrounded by the items we buried with him. The chilling certainty was too much for Graham to deny. He immediately called his best friend, Dr. Elias, a forensic pathologist, asking him to initiate the complex process for legal exhumation. While we waited for Dr. Elias to begin the paperwork, Graham and I went into Finn's untouched bedroom. There, Graham found Finn's old journal. We read the entries, stunned by the realization that Finn had been plagued by prophetic dreams of his own death and funeral weeks before the accident. The final entry, written the day he died, stated his conviction that he would find a way back to us and explicitly requested that his phone be buried with him. The journal confirmed what the calls suggested. This was not a mistake of fate, but a deliberate act of communication planned 15 years ago. As we absorbed this truth, Finn called again, his voice now firm. He revealed he could project his consciousness, proving it by accurately describing the trophy Graham was holding and the form Dr. Elias was filling out. He explained his body was in perfect stasis and he needed to be rescued within 3 days, a temporary window of opportunity, before his connection faded. Most terrifyingly, he warned that he was blocking the path for others, dark, angry souls who wished to escape the borderlands he was in. Graham hung up, terrified by the 3-day deadline and the responsibility of preventing a possible spiritual catastrophe, knowing they would have to break the law to save their son. Graham immediately grabbed his phone and called Dr. Elias, who was already working on the paperwork for the exhumation at his office. The call didn't last long, but I could hear the rising desperation in Graham's voice. Elias, listen to me. I know what I'm asking is impossible, but Finn says we only have 3 days. Max, we need that authorization now. I could only hear Dr. Elias's side as a muffled, rapid voice. Graham's face hardened. I don't care about the judicial recess. This is a matter of life and death, or whatever state Finn is in. Can't you talk to the judge, pull some strings, call in a favor? Anything. He listened again, his expression sinking further into despair. He finally lowered the phone, pinching the bridge of his nose. Elias says even if he works miracles, the soonest the court could possibly grant a lawful exhumation is 5 days from now. We need signatures, official notifications, and a full medical review. They won't just let us dig up a grave based on a frantic call. 5 days. Finn had given us 3. The window of opportunity was shrinking, and with it, the terrifying prospect of him being left alone in that eternal darkness, potentially with those others he mentioned. We don't have time to wait, I stated, the words firm despite the tremor in my hands. 5 days is too late. Graham looked at me, understanding what I was implying. He had built his entire career on logic, rules, and adherence to protocol. Now I was asking him to become a criminal. You're suggesting we violate a grave, Elara, he said, his voice low and strained. That's a felony. We could go to prison for years, and even worse, if we get caught, they will never, ever allow us near Finn again. They might even move him. And what's the alternative, Graham? I challenged him, moving closer. To sit here and wait while our son, who dreamed of his own death and prepared for his return, fades away completely? He's a young man trapped in a tomb, fighting off, what, ghosts? Demons? I placed my hands on his face, forcing him to meet my eyes. We already lost him once. We're not losing him again because of bureaucracy. Graham closed his eyes, his scientific skepticism fighting a losing battle against the raw, supernatural evidence and the desperation in my eyes. After a long moment, he opened them. We need help, he finally conceded. We need a team that won't ask questions and knows how to be discreet. He immediately called Dr. Elias back, putting the phone on speaker this time. Elias, forget the legal process. It's too slow. We are going to do this ourselves. Tonight. Dr. Elias's frantic voice burst through the speaker. Graham, are you crazy? That's insane. You'll ruin your life. You can't just exhume a body. You need machinery, expertise, and a pathologist present to confirm the identity and cause of death. That's me. I won't participate in a crime. I don't need you to participate in the crime, Elias, Graham replied, his voice calm and cold. I need your expertise. I need to know exactly where to dig, how deep, and what to look for when we open the casket. And I need a silent partner who can help us stabilize Finn's body once it's out, if we succeed. You're a pathologist, not a criminal. Just be on standby. We'll tell you when it's done. Dr. Elias was silent for a moment, the only sound being his heavy breathing. Graham, I swear I will lose my license over this. You won't lose your son, Graham retorted. That's the difference, the pathologist sighed deeply. Okay, give me an hour. I'll get the coordinates for Finn's plot and an estimate of the depth and casket type. I'll also put together a basic field kit for preservation, just in case. But I will not be there. You hear me? I hear you, Elias, Graham confirmed. And thank you. You're the best friend a desperate parent could have. After hanging up, Graham looked at me. We need a driver, a lookout, and someone strong enough to handle a heavy casket. And, most importantly, someone who has access to the cemetery after hours. Mr. Bellamy, I said instantly. The watchman. He knows the site better than anyone, and he's been kind to me for 15 years. If I explain it to him, he might help. Graham was skeptical. A security guard? He'll turn us in the second we mention digging up a grave. No, I insisted. He's a good man. He saw me yesterday morning completely broken over this. He will not betray us. While Graham gathered the necessary tools, shovels, ropes, a large tarp from the garage, I called Mr. Bellamy. I spoke carefully, not revealing the full, incredible truth, but emphasizing the urgency and my conviction that Finn was sending us a sign of imminent danger at his grave. I appealed to his kindness, to his years of seeing my grief. To my relief, Mr. Bellamy listened in silence. He only asked one question. Ms. Elara, if I do this, am I helping save your boy's soul or ruining my own? You're giving him a chance, Bellamy, I replied. That's all I can promise. I'll be at the East Gate at 1 a.m., he finally agreed, his voice heavy with resignation. I'll make sure the cameras are facing the wrong way. Be quick and be silent. The team was set. Graham and I would handle the digging and the logistics. Mr. Bellamy would provide access and lookout. Dr. Elias would guide us remotely and treat Finn afterward. We had less than 8 hours until the exhumation began. The next few hours were a frantic blur of preparation. Graham, the analytical engineer, was now channeling his focus into criminal logistics. He loaded the shovels, ropes, and a large tarp into the back of my vintage Ford Bronco. Dr. Elias sent us a detailed, encrypted message. The casket was an outer vault model designed to resist water intrusion, meaning there was a decent chance the interior was preserved. The grave was approximately 6 feet deep, and we needed to dig a precise trench around the vault before we could lift the casket itself. His final instructions were chillingly clinical. Do not breathe the air immediately upon opening the casket. If the body is preserved, its internal atmosphere will be toxic. As the clock ticked toward midnight, a strange calm settled over us. Fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a laser-like focus. Get Finn out. At 12:45 a.m., we drove the vintage Ford Bronco through the dark streets of Seattle. The rain had started again, light but persistent, lending the entire scenario a moody, noir atmosphere. We parked a few blocks from Greenwood Memorial Park, taking the last 5 minutes on foot, carrying the heavy tools wrapped in the tarp. The east gate was slightly ajar. We slipped through the small opening, and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mr. Bellamy, the watchman, dressed in his official uniform, his face drawn with anxiety. "Miss Elara, Mr. Graham," he whispered, his voice shaking. "We have maybe an hour. The main security patrol sweeps this section at 2 a.m. I've disabled the closest camera. The second one is too far to see clearly, but keep the lights pointed down." "Thank you, Bellamy," Graham said, gripping his arm firmly. "We won't forget this." Mr. Bellamy led us quickly along the cypress path. The cemetery, usually a place of quiet reflection during the day, felt eerie and vast under the glow of the distant city lights filtered through the rain. We reached the big oak tree, and there was Finn's headstone. The moment we dropped the tools, the rain intensified, adding noise cover but making the earth immediately slick. Graham worked with a furious, methodical intensity. He outlined the perimeter of the grave using a small, specialized spade Dr. Elias had provided, then handed me a shovel. "We work fast." "No talking, just dig," he commanded. The first 3 feet of dirt came up relatively easily, a mixture of soil and tangled roots, but the next few feet were agonizing. The earth was heavy, dense, and now waterlogged. Every scoop felt like lifting a boulder. We took turns, the only sounds the scrape of metal on dirt, our own ragged breathing, and the steady drumming of the rain. Half an hour passed. We were covered in mud, drenched, and exhausted. We were standing in a pit almost waist-deep, but the casket was nowhere in sight. Doubt began to creep in. Had we miscalculated the location? Just as I paused, leaning on the shovel, Graham's shovel hit something hard with a dull, echoing thud. "The vault," he whispered, his voice thick with adrenaline. We found it. The cement vault housing the casket was cold and unyielding. We had to dig around its sides and clear the top. This required using smaller tools to scrape away the remaining earth, a meticulous, time-consuming effort that felt agonizingly slow. Finally, the top of the vault was fully exposed. It was a massive concrete lid. "Bellamy," Graham called softly. "We need the ropes and the winch." The watchman, who had been standing nervously outside the pit, handed us the equipment. This part was purely about physics. We secured the heavy nylon straps around the edges of the concrete slab. Graham, using his engineering experience, rigged a makeshift pulley system attached to the trunk of the massive oak tree. It was crude, slow, and relied entirely on muscle. We pulled. Our muscles screamed. The rope bit into our hands. The slab didn't move. Again, Graham grunted. 1, 2, 3. With a sickening, grating sound, the slab shifted. We pulled again, inch by agonizing inch, until the heavy lid was off and resting crookedly on the edge of the pit. The casket was revealed. It was a dark, polished mahogany, completely intact, protected by the surrounding vault, just as Dr. Elias had predicted. It was eerily pristine, almost untouched by time, resting in the damp earth. Graham dropped down, his hands shaking, and began working the locks on the heavy mahogany lid. He inserted a crowbar into the seal. "Stand back, Elara," he ordered, remembering Dr. Elias's warning about the preserved internal atmosphere. With a wrench of metal and a sharp thwump sound, the seal broke. Graham forced the lid open, and a rush of cold, musty air, smelling faintly of ozone and something sweet, escaped from the grave. We instinctively recoiled, holding our breath. Then we looked inside. The beam of Graham's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the interior of the casket. And there he was, Finn. He looked exactly as he had on the day we buried him 15 years ago. The suit was intact, the white silk lining was slightly discolored, but his face was perfectly preserved. There was no sign of the 15 years that had passed. He still looked 19, resting peacefully, though his skin had a translucent alabaster quality. But that wasn't the most shocking thing. The air around his body was shimmering. There was a faint blue-green phosphorescence, a low, constant glow emanating from his hands and chest, pulsing with the slow, steady rhythm of a deep-sea creature. It was subtle, almost like a halo of otherworldly energy, and it cast dancing shadows on the inside of the casket lid. He was holding the old Nokia phone in his left hand, resting on his chest, its tiny screen dark. Graham let out a ragged gasp. My God, he's in a state of perfect preservation, like he was frozen in time. He's not frozen, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. He's glowing. He's waiting. As we watched, the faint blue-green light around his chest intensified, pulsing faster, and Finn's eyes, the eyes of my 19-year-old son, snapped open. They were wide, clear and focused directly on us. He didn't move, still constrained by the burial garments and the small space, but his lips parted. He didn't speak a word. Instead, the Nokia phone in his hand suddenly burst to life, the small dark screen glowing bright, and a single silent text message appeared, projected by the luminescence onto the inside of the casket lid. For both Graham and me to read, "Hurry, others are close. Get me to the water." The sight of Finn's eyes opening, coupled with the urgent, silently projected message, shocked us into frenzied action. Graham was the first to move, pulling a large, insulated silver blanket from the supply bag, part of Dr. Elias's field kit. Bellamy. Graham hissed at the watchman, who was frozen in horror by the spectacle of the glowing, talking corpse. "Look out! Keep your eyes on the road!" The smell emanating from the casket, once the initial rush of preserved air had dissipated, was metallic and faintly sweet, like ancient roses mixed with electricity. "We have to be gentle," I murmured, reaching into the casket. His skin, though intact, felt fragile, unnervingly cold, and incredibly stiff. "We can't just lift him," Graham reasoned, his mind back in engineering mode. "The spine might be compromised. We need to cut him free from the casket base." He took a specialized thin wire, again, provided by Dr. Elias, and quickly ran it beneath Finn's preserved form, severing the burial linens that had been tacked to the velvet lining of the casket. The shimmering blue-green light intensified as the wire passed beneath him, making the air crackle faintly. As soon as he was free, Graham and I carefully maneuvered Finn's body onto the silver preservation blanket. His limbs were rigid, his youthful face still serene and pale, but his eyes were wide open, constantly tracking our movements. Once he was fully wrapped, the glowing light diminished slightly, contained by the reflective material. It was an impossible silent burden we carried out of the grave. "Bellamy, help us fill the pit," Graham ordered, climbing out of the hole. The watchman, still pale, grabbed a shovel, working mechanically to push the loose dirt back into the chasm. While he worked, Graham and I hauled the heavy, bundled form to the vintage Ford Bronco. We laid Finn carefully across the back seat, securing him with blankets. I paused, looking back at the pit. Mr. Bellamy had managed to cover the exposed vault and was replacing the heavy concrete lid, concealing the crime. He replaced the sod we had removed, his face a mask of fear and confusion. "Go, Elara," Graham urged, sliding into the passenger seat. I floored the Bronco. The heavy old vehicle roared to life, tires spitting gravel and mud as we tore away from Greenwood Memorial Park and into the pre-dawn Seattle streets. We didn't stop until we reached my house. Graham called Dr. Elias the moment we arrived. "Elias, he's out. He's perfectly preserved, but he's emitting some kind of energy, and he communicated with us. He's asking for water." Dr. Elias arrived 10 minutes later, pulling into the driveway in his unmarked sedan. He walked into the living room where we had laid Finn on a large, plastic-covered workbench Graham had quickly set up in the center of the room. The forensic pathologist, a man who had spent his life observing death, stopped dead when he saw Finn. He stared at the body of the 19-year-old, preserved as if he had died yesterday, his eyes open and the faint, residual blue-green light flickering around his still hands. "My God!" "Graham," Dr. Elias whispered, dropping his medical bag. "This is not preservation. This is stasis. He hasn't aged a day. The body is in a state of suspended animation, a kind of biological crystallization." He rushed to the workbench, his fear quickly replaced by scientific curiosity. He carefully touched Finn's neck. No pulse, no respiration. But there's residual static energy and no cellular degradation whatsoever. "It's impossible." I ignored the science. "He asked for water, Elias. He needs water." Dr. Elias hesitated, then nodded. "Water is life. If the cells are in stasis, perhaps they need hydration to restart the biological clock." He quickly prepared a saline solution, but before he could use it, Finn's hand twitched. The old Nokia phone, which we had placed on the workbench beside him, lit up again with the shimmering projected text: "Not saline, natural, clean water, sunlight, music." "Sunlight and music?" Graham repeated, perplexed. I grabbed a glass of fresh water and gently lifted Finn's head. I slowly poured the water between his lips. The water didn't spill. It was immediately, impossibly absorbed. As the first drops of liquid entered his body, the faint blue-green light flared brightly, momentarily illuminating the whole room, before sinking back down to a soft, steady hum. It was like watching a dying battery finally receive a charge. "He's stabilizing," Dr. Elias murmured, watching the subtle shift in the energy field. "The sun," I realized, looking out the window. "It's coming up." I opened the blackout curtains in the living room, allowing the first rays of the Seattle morning sun to stream in and fall directly onto Finn's body. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The moment the light touched his skin, the rigid tension in his body eased. His arms relaxed, falling slightly outward. The shimmering light around him intensified again, pulsing strongly with the sun's energy. Then came the music. I ran to the sound system and put on his favorite playlist, an energetic punk rock song he used to blast when getting ready for school. The loud, vibrant music filled the quiet house. As the music played, Finn's eyes, which had been wide and staring, slowly, deliberately, closed. The energy field around him began to diminish rapidly, and the rigidity left his body completely. He looked, finally, like a normal person sleeping. The Nokia phone on the workbench flashed its final short message before going completely dark. "Rest now. Don't wake me. Wait for the transformation." The stillness in the living room was deafening once the music ended. Finn lay motionless, his 19-year-old body resting on the workbench, surrounded by the remnants of the illegal exhumation, mud, ropes, and the silver preservation blanket. He was no longer emitting the eerie blue-green light, but his chest now rose and fell with the slow, shallow rhythm of normal human breathing. "He's breathing," Dr. Elias confirmed, checking his pulse again, amazement warring with professional terror on his face. A weak pulse, slow but present. His biological functions have restarted. It's a complete, spontaneous physiological reversal. "What does 'wait for the transformation' mean?" Graham asked, running a hand over his tired, mud-caked face. Dr. Elias shook his head, utterly lost. "I can't even begin to guess. The body he's in is 15 years out of date. His cells, his DNA, it's all frozen at age 19. If his consciousness is 34, there might be a massive biological catch-up process, but that's science fiction." I ignored the medical arguments. My son was breathing. That was enough. We need to clean him up and hide him. Bellamy can only hold the police off for so long if someone sees a newly dug grave. We carefully removed the burial suit. It was stiff, tailored for a dead boy, and we discarded it, a painful but necessary rejection of the past. We cleaned the dirt from Finn's body with warm cloths. As we did so, we noticed that the bruises from the accident, which had been hidden beneath the faint funeral makeup 15 years ago, were now gone. His skin was flawless, unnaturally smooth, but undeniably alive. We moved him to Finn's old room, the preserved sanctuary. We carefully placed him in his twin bed, pulling the Batman blanket over his chest. He was home. "I need to leave," Dr. Elias said, gathering his field kit. "I'll take the burial suit and all the evidence of the exhumation with me. I'll dispose of it carefully. You need to keep him hidden and keep watching. Call me the instant anything happens." We agreed to the plan. Dr. Elias left through the back door, taking the incriminating evidence with him. Graham and I sat in the living room, completely exhausted, but unable to look away from the hallway leading to Finn's room. We waited for 12 hours. The sun moved across the Seattle sky, casting long shadows. Neither of us spoke much. We just watched the clock, sipping lukewarm coffee, waiting for the impossible to happen again. As the second sunset began to paint the sky with hues of gray and purple, I felt a deep tremor, not in the house, but in the air. A low hum that resonated in my chest. "Did you feel that?" I asked Graham. He nodded, already on his feet. "It's coming from his room." We rushed down the hallway. The door to Finn's room was open, and the lights were flickering madly. Inside, the energy was palpable, thick and overwhelming. The posters on the wall rattled, and dust motes danced violently in the air, and at the center of the storm was Finn. He was still lying on the bed, but his body was contorting slightly, encased in a brilliant fiery orange-red glow. The glow was emanating from his very skin, like liquid heat. The Batman blanket had been thrown off, revealing a process that was both horrifying and miraculous. His body was rapidly changing. The youthful roundness of his face was lengthening, his jawline sharpening. His limbs were growing, stretching under the pressure of the intense light. We watched in stunned silence as the clothes he was wearing, my old t-shirt and sweats, began to tear as his frame widened and elongated. His boyish figure was transforming into that of a mature man. The transformation was fast, agonizingly fast. It was an instant aging process, reversing the 15 years of stasis in a matter of minutes. When the light reached his head, his dark hair grew slightly thicker, and the look of the 19-year-old boy was entirely erased. Then, with a final blinding flash of orange light, the energy dissipated completely, and the room went silent. The lights stopped flickering. The dust settled. A man lay on the bed. He had Finn's face, Finn's eyes, and the same familiar mole above his left eyebrow, but he was undeniably a man in his mid-30s, exactly the age he should have been. 34 years old. He looked healthy, strong, and deeply weary. His eyes snapped open again, no longer wide with fear, but calm, intelligent, and focused on us. "Mom." His voice was deeper, resonant, but still undeniably his. "Dad." Graham collapsed onto the edge of the bed, tears streaming down his face. "Finn, you're grown up." The man who was our son smiled, a smile that had been missing from our lives for 15 years. "It's good to be back," Finn said, sitting up carefully. "But we don't have much time." Finn sat on the edge of the bed, no longer the 19-year-old boy we remembered, but a 34-year-old man, complete and whole. The transformation had clearly exhausted him, yet there was an urgent intensity in his deep-set eyes. Graham and I sat beside him, touching his arm, his hand, trying to internalize the miracle that was his physical presence. "What happened?" I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling. "How are you here? What was the stasis?" Finn took a deep breath, looking around his childhood room, his adult eyes seeing the posters and the dusty guitar. "When the bike hit me, I didn't just die. The impact, combined with the electrical energy from the crash, created a unique resonance field that trapped my body in perfect stasis. My soul, my consciousness, separated and moved to the next phase, but it was incomplete. The connection to the phone, the one I put in the grave for this exact purpose, acted as a tether." "A tether to where?" Graham asked, the engineer needing details. "To the other side, or rather the borderlands," Finn explained. "It's a transitional realm where consciousness exists outside the body. For 15 years, I was a detached observer, seeing your grief, seeing the world move on. The phone, that indestructible Nokia, was an anchor. My consciousness instinctively learned to draw energy from the earth and the stasis field to charge that anchor. Waiting for the right moment, the solar alignment, The rising tide of energy I mentioned. And the others? I asked, remembering the fear in his voice during the call. Finn's face darkened. The moment I woke up and started using the phone to project my consciousness, I destabilized the border. Some souls there are peaceful, ready to move on. Others are trapped by earthly attachments, anger, greed, obsession. They sensed the opening I created, a path back through the anchor. They wanted to seize my body or cross into this world. You were protecting us, Graham realized, his voice full of awe. I was blocking the gate, Finn corrected, but the block was weakening. That's why I needed the three things. The water reactivated my biology. The sunlight provided the pure solar energy for the transformation. And the music, the loud, vibrant energy of life, catalyzed the final change, aligning my 34-year-old consciousness with my biological clock. He slid off the bed, stretching his new, mature muscles. He looked down at his parents, a quiet sadness in his eyes. The time I have here is limited, he said. I won't disappear, but I can't stay. My purpose wasn't just to return. It was to complete the cycle and give you peace. He sat between us, taking my hand and then Graham's, weaving them together, a simple gesture that healed 15 years of separation and 10 years of divorce. Mom, Dad, you need to understand the final lesson I learned over there. He looked at us intensely. The grief you carried, the love that kept my room frozen, that was powerful. But you kept me tied to the grave, and in doing so, you tied yourselves to the past. Love should be a current that pushes forward, not an anchor that holds back. He paused, his grip tightening. You both have a second chance now. Not just for me, but for yourselves. Live your lives, be happy. Stop counting the years I missed, and start embracing the years you have left. He pulled us close in a tight, strong embrace, the hug of a man, not a boy. The embrace was warm, real, and full of a profound sense of finality. When he pulled back, a faint shimmering, the blue-green light, returned softer than before, surrounding his whole body like a peaceful aura. The connection is breaking completely now, Finn murmured. I'm letting go. The gate is sealed. The others can't follow, and I can finally move on, knowing you are both free. He stood up, walking slowly towards the window, bathed in the soft, late-afternoon light. He turned back, giving us one last, loving smile. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye. Dad, I love you. And then, with the gentle flicker of a candle being extinguished, the light surrounding Finn flared once more and dissolved into the air, leaving only the scent of ozone and sweet roses. Finn was gone. Graham and I sat in silence for a long time, holding hands, staring at the empty spot where he had stood. There was no terror, no confusion, only peace. We had seen the impossible, broken the laws of nature, and committed a crime. But in doing so, we had brought our son home long enough for him to set us free. The next day, Graham took the vintage Ford Bronco to a car wash to remove the mud, and he called Dr. Elias to confirm the event. We had lost Finn again, but this time he hadn't left a hole in my chest. He left a healed heart and a shared, unbelievable memory. I didn't keep his room locked anymore. I started sorting his belongings, keeping the cherished memories, but making space for the future. Graham and I never reconciled romantically, but we became the closest of friends, united by the secret of the man who came back from the dead to tell us to live. The grave in Greenwood Memorial Park was eventually covered up by the persistent Seattle rain and nature, concealing the whole event. But the most important thing was that Finn wasn't in the dirt anymore. His soul had finally passed through the gate, and he had given us the greatest gift a child can give a parent, the permission to live without fear of loss.